Hello, I am Elon, and what I see there is this interesting video. Are all the languages in the world connected? Before watching it, first of all, yes, what I want to say. Of course, they are. Obviously, at one point, one group of not even like modern humans, but our very far ancestors, when they started something like language, it most likely happened in this one specific group when some kind of genetic mutation happened, which allowed for our ancestors to even have something like language. And any language which is now reconstructed, like any proto language, it's not like aliens came and gave it to these ancient people. Any language had another ancestral language. And if we had, yes, time machine and could travel like by some periods of time, like 5,000 years ago, and from there another 5,000 years ago, we could obviously find the connection between a lot of modern, well, okay, all modern languages to some ancient languages. Yes, of course. Many of these languages which existed thousands years ago, they became extinct. They don't have nothing.
Language is an integral part of geography that you can't avoid. Every corner of the world has a system of communicating. Some languages are related and others are completely
Mhm.
unintelligible. But how did they all begin? And is there anything that connects them all? Are there any words that are found in every language? I'm going to answer that last question at the end of this. So, today there are about 7,000 documented known active languages, about 44% of which are actually endangered, as in they have less than 1,000 speakers. And about half of everybody on this planet, about 4 or so
Yeah.
billion people, speak.
So that is happening all the time. There are obviously a lot of languages which are extinct now, and this is still happening. It's still happening.
At least one of the 20 most commonly spoken languages. The top 5 being English, Mandarin Chinese, Hindi, followed by Spanish and French. All these languages evolved over time and spread to the areas where they are spoken. Languages are a lot like people, though. The more you turn back the clock and go back in time, you start to kind of realize that all these languages start to sort of
Mhm.
converge into the same singular branch that they and their sibling languages are all derived from. AKA, you can kind of see the ancestor where all the languages were born out of. But
Yes,
how can you
exactly.
tell
How?
whomst that
Mhm.
ancestor is? Languages fall under families. Like, you know how when Spanish people and Italian people meet each other, they can still kind of communicate and pick off of certain words that they understand because they're related? Like that. Like,
Mhm.
even though they are completely separate and distinct languages, they share something that goes way back that each side has kept. It's like verbal
Mhm.
DNA. And the funny thing is, some languages in this world
Yeah,
are
yeah.
complete isolates. They don't fall under any family group. Today, about 80% of the world speaks at least one language that belongs to the top 5 language families. They are the Indo-European, the Sino-Tibetan, the
Mhm.
Niger-Congo, the Afro-Asiatic, and the Austronesian. Now, here's the funny thing. Asia has the highest number of languages in the world, somewhere around, I believe, what is it, 2,300? It's about a third of all the languages can be
Of
found in
course.
Asia. However, they only have about like 25 or so language families within the entire continent. It's actually the Americas that has the highest concentration of language families that are completely distinct from each other. I think it's estimated to be somewhere
And
around
that is
100. So first,
interesting. You can see, actually, yes, how finding even a proto language is like, not finding, but reconstructing. It's interesting. It is interesting, of course, and useful. But you see how languages change so fast that we can think that a lot of languages which are completely unrelated today could technically have same ancestral language, I don't know, 30,000 years ago, technically. Problem is we cannot prove that, and we cannot really put like these strict borders around any of the language, because all languages, all people during history affected each other.
kind of break down each region of the world and see which language families dominate and which languages are related under which families. So first off, you can see the largest and most widely spread is the Indo-European languages. This includes everything from Hindi to Norwegian. That means, yes, European languages have a common ancestor with some languages that are spoken all the way in South Asia, like in India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran. They all fall under the same umbrella. Isn't that crazy? People in the frozen glaciers of Iceland have something in common with the tropics of Sri Lanka. Indo-European languages are speculated to have originated in what is now the Caspian steppe region of Central Asia, and from there they
first of all speculated, yes, originated. They didn't originate anywhere in. It didn't originate in any specific area, in any specific period in human history, because this what supposedly this area where these languages originated, yeah, are not coming from aliens. They already had ancestral languages before that. And if we talk about any proto language, it's not proto language, it is proto languages, most likely. Well, okay, yes, of course, there can be sometimes that there is this one language. Let's say we have Basque, for example, now in Europe, which is isolated language. Something happens, and this language start to spread and split, and we could say that after, for example, 10,000 years, all Europe speaks these Basque-related languages, and we could say that yes, this Basque language, this is the area, and this is maybe approximate time. So this is ancestral language of all, like after these 10,000, 5,000, 10,000 years, for all these languages in, for example, Europe, or who knows, maybe on the whole planet. But even Basque language, we just don't know where it comes from exactly. But they did have some kind of ancestral languages. So I personally think that what we know about Proto-Indo-European, and I have video about that, that these so-called Proto-Indo-European languages most likely already at that time were covering much bigger area than just this part. It could be even like this area already. But as these Proto-Indo-European languages existed back then, like these separate groups already, not all these ancient Proto-Indo-European languages continue to modern days. A lot of them went extinct. And one or few much closer language groups, maybe from this area, spread, while their other sister, brother, cousin languages, and maybe not even all of them, died out. But they were related. And also, as this one branch, for example, of Proto-Indo-European, was already similar to these other branches of Proto-Indo-European somewhere else, it was much easier for them to replace these languages because they were already quite close. But also, I think that not necessarily these Indo-European languages and these Indo-European languages and these Indo-European languages, as they are not necessarily come from the one exact same Proto-Indo-European language. They could come from, we most likely we had one here, another branch from which these other languages later split off.
Spread north and south, dominating most of all of Europe and much of what is now Eastern Turkey.
Yes, the problem is we just
and that also
can't
means,
really
if you think about it,
do it.
many of the languages used in India today, like Hindi or Gujarati or Rajasthani or Punjabi, they're all descended from an ancestor that is not native to India. Crazy, right? The most native Indian languages of India are actually the southern Dravidian languages that are found in the southern part of India, like Tamil, Telugu, Malayalam.
Well,
Only about 20% of India actually speaks Dravidian.
But how interesting that in Sri Lanka we have even Indo-European
Indo-Aryan languages, and maybe completely unintelligible. They have nothing to do with each other. They're not related, and they've been around for so long. The funny thing is, the majority of Central Asia used to be Indo-European, but then the Turkic peoples came in and dominated it. So now you have people like Kazakhs and Kyrgyz and Uzbeks, all just Turkmens dominating all of Central Asia, when originally they came from the Eastern Siberia regions. Yeah, it's crazy. You see these migration patterns of language groups, and we're going to get more into that. So of the Indo-European family group, it kind of breaks down into 8 main subgroups. In South Asia, you find the Indo-Aryan group, sometimes called Indo-Iranian. These include languages like Persian, Farsi, Pashtun, Urdu, Hindi, extending all the way to the Sinhala language found in Sri Lanka. If you go to the Caucasus region, just a little bit up north, you find the isolated Armenian language. They don't have any other relative groups. They are just under the Indo-European family, but they have no other branch languages that they relate to. So Armenian is an isolate within the Indo-European family. And then
here from Good Language Tutor. I tutor specifically French, Italian, Spanish, and Portuguese, but I also specialize in linguistics and etymology. If we look at the Indo-European languages, this is essentially the language family that encompasses about 94% of Europe's population. You can take this family and break it into 3 large categories. You have the Germanic languages of Central and Northern Europe, the Romance languages of Southern Europe, and then the Slavic languages of Central and Eastern Europe. The biggest languages of these are both English, of course, and German. Other languages within this group are Norwegian, Swedish,
English
Danish, and
is
Dutch.
very
The origins
Germanic,
of the Germanic languages is probably somewhere from southern Sweden or northern Germany. Lastly,
Of
we have the
course,
Romance
it
languages,
is.
which are spoken primarily in southern Europe and the Mediterranean basin. The major languages of the Romance languages include French, Spanish, Portuguese, Italian, and Romanian. These languages descend from Vulgar Latin. That's right, the Latin that was spoken throughout the Roman Empire. Aside from the big 3 language groups within the Indo-European
Why
language
it was
family, we
vulgar.
also have a few others, including the Celtic languages that have origins in
Greek and
Ireland, Great Britain,
Albanian.
and Brittany, France, and the Baltic languages, which include Latvian and Lithuanian. A special mention should also be made to the non-Indo-European languages spoken in Europe. These include the Uralic languages, Hungarian, Finnish, the Turkic languages, Turkish and Turkey, and Basque, which is a unique isolated language with no outside ties in the southwest region of France and the northwest region of Spain.
Thank you, Brian. Now with that, let's move on to Asia with their largest family group, the Sino-Tibetan. This is the behemoth of especially East Asia. Most linguists place the possible origin of the Sino-Tibetan languages in northern China, specifically around the Yellow River Basin, near the edges of the Tibetan
I don't know
Plateau.
if
This area is associated
have
with
no
early
knowledge
Neolithic
about
cultures that were
Asian
discovered, like the
languages,
Yangshao culture, dating as far back to 5000
I don't know if
BC.
I can
So
say
here's the deal. A
something
lot of people
about
assume that
that.
China was like these, which is like, no, it wasn't. Like, China was and still is home to like hundreds of different languages and dialects that are oftentimes completely unintelligible to each other. You know, it's like Portuguese versus Romanian. Like they fall under the same family group, but they can't understand each other. It actually wasn't until the 1950s that Mandarin, or Putonghua, was officially defined and promoted as the national language of China, and it was based on the Beijing dialect
Like
of Chinese.
always.
It's kind of similar to what Italy
Oh,
did
it is
with standard
happening
modernized
everywhere.
Italian. You know, they kind of just took like the Florentine dialect.
Standard modernized language. Like, okay, so technically you could say even fake made up languages. Okay, standard language is useful, especially if you have a bigger country. You need some kind of a way to communicate with all people in that country in a language which is understandable by everyone who lives there, obviously. And if you want to have like books, newspapers, TV, or something, yes. Or even, like education, science, whatever. You need, of course, some kind of this one standard language. But standard language, this is. But yes, also for language learning, again, it could be important, of course, because if I decide to learn, for example, Italian, first of all, what kind of materials for learning? Yes, okay, Italian. We have most likely that will be all based on the standard Italian. Or if I want to learn Italian, do I have to choose a region in Italy and choose that specific regional language or variety of language or whatever you call it? Do we call all these languages Italian languages? Most likely no, they have different names. So yes, if you want to learn a language from a specific country, you most likely will learn the standard version, which in many cases is not, yeah, it's not maybe even a real language. But sometimes maybe it is, but sometimes historically, these official languages are kind of made up to extent. Of course, not from nothing.
Structured it so that everybody in Italy could speak Italian. Mandarin was just kind of reconstructed and imposed upon the people recently. It's not even like something that was happening for a long time. But anyway, with that in mind, obviously, Mandarin Chinese is the largest of all the Sino-Tibetan languages with over 1.3 billion speakers on Earth. Some still survive today, and you can even encounter areas where they have recognized legal status. For example, the entire country of Paraguay has dual official status with Spanish and Guarani. There's a long story behind that, but yeah, Paraguay. And in 2009, in addition to Spanish, Bolivia actually made 36 other native languages of their country official, making them the country with the most official national languages. Today, the Native American language families with the largest amount of speakers are Quechua and Aymara, found in the Andes Mountains, mostly in Bolivia and Peru. Some people say these two language families might be related to each other, but they're typically separated. From there, the Mayan family language speakers across Mesoamerica number somewhere around 7 million. Uto-Aztecans range about 2 million, mostly found in Mexico, the largest one being the Nahuatl language. And from there, others like the Arawak and Tupian language families have a lot of speakers as well.
When you have something like mind, so we don't even know. It could be or maybe not. So it's really hard to tell often the relationships between languages. So between even languages today, so how we could even know what happened like thousands years ago.
Heavily present in South America and the Caribbean. So with that being said, now you can kind of see how all the languages of the world kind of cluster up and form their own separate family groups that they all derive from. But the question is, can we go even further? This is where it gets very speculative and complicated because first of all, languages don't leave fossils. Second of all, we didn't have recording devices back then, so we can't really be sure of anything. But what we do have are ancient written texts. And today, the oldest written texts that we have of a written language are the Sumerian texts written in cuneiform.
It's not like what we do have, which is amazing that we have, what we don't have. How many of even, yes, written texts are not preserved? What is the percentage of back then, yes, existing written text which survived to modern days? And what about those languages which were not written down? How many were there?
Around 3200 BC. This is considered the oldest known written language on Earth. Now, granted, I know some of you are going to say, keep in mind, there are some proto-writing systems and symbols that are believed to have predated the Sumerian text, like the Proto-Elamite scripts in Iran, or the...
Not like that also appeared in one day out of nowhere. It had probably, who knows how long this evolution time from one stick to
Jiahu symbols of China, possibly dating back to the 7th millennium BC, or the Vincha symbols in southern Europe from around the 5th to 6th millennium BC. But these artifacts can't really properly be deciphered, and it can't really be determined if they were just part of a symbolic communication system as opposed to being a full written script used to write an entire language. You know how like a red octagon is kind of understood to mean stop, but it's not like letters.
When we have this written language, we need some kind of like this symbols which represent something, like a word or a sound. When you write down literal words, for example, but there is another layer of language which also it is still a part of language, all these signs and symbols, even if a lot of these signs and symbols can be understandable in completely unrelated language, but we could kind of make it like this separate form of communication still.
writing out a word, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
without trying to bore you too much with getting into all the details on how linguists do all this stuff, like they take patterns of speech and like cognates and whatever, they figure out how the patterns of the grammar, whatever, blah, blah, blah. They do all that scientifically linguistic stuff, and they are able to sort of kind of reconstruct what they think
Sort of, kind
old
of
languages
what they think.
may have
May,
sounded
may,
like.
may,
And by
yeah.
doing so, we are basically creating something that we think may date back as far as 10 to 12,000 years, maybe. To this day, the only two language families that we can
Actually,
kind of somewhat confidently
I think, when linguists create this proto-language, I don't think they feel like they create or they are able to reconstruct the real existing language. What they create is something like what could be used to group this language when you find something like these similarities between languages. So it's not being created necessary as proto-language, for example, like as a real language. And it would be weird to assume that and I don't believe any serious linguist really thinks that the created, constructed proto-language is the exact language some people at some time literally were speaking like that, and they used it in their everyday life. These reconstructed languages, proto-languages, are not real languages. They are reconstructed based on known languages, not necessarily existing modern languages today, but also on written ancient languages. Did I explain it clearly? But I think everyone who is interested in languages and in history and proto-languages, they know this anyway. So, so this kind of reconstructed language is used more like as this reference, something to work with.
partially reconstruct are Proto-Indo-European and Proto-Afro-Asiatic. But can we go back even further? Now, this is where everything gets controversial
That's
and
a
linguists
problem.
literally start to get angry and threaten each other. I've literally seen linguists get like rage-filled and like threaten each other over these things. It's so stupid. It's like, dude, you're fighting over a prefix over a word. Like, put the knife down. But I'll give you some examples. When it comes to Native American languages, many linguists have tried to see if there was any
Yes,
kind of
this is-
possible connection to maybe
Yeah,
the
that would be
Athabascans
interesting
and
to
Eastern
find this connection.
Siberians, since
But
as
we
the migration theory stands,
know
Native
there is
Americans crossed
connection,
over
at
the
least
land bridge from
genetically, for
ancient
sure.
Siberia into the Americas
So-
and then migrated.
We have to, again, logically assume that there is connection. And maybe these languages in Siberia, they don't have any descendants, they went extinct, most likely. But connections, there was still connection.
downwards. So it kind of makes sense to think maybe there's some kind of connection there. But yeah, some linguists call this theory the Dene-Yeniseian languages, linking possibly the Athabascan or Dene languages to the Yeniseian
Because
ancient
I
language
have
of what is now
Siberian DNA, and in oldest, well, I don't know if first, but when I did first DNA test for myself, 23andMe gave me Native American less than 1%. But that obviously was not Native American.
It's almost an extinct language. Apparently, they found some patterns in the verb structure and some sound correspondences. Not enough information to completely make a solid claim off of, but it's an interesting theory. If this was true, it would
very long time ago. All connection, what was happening back then, it is lost. It is lost. It is unreconstructable, unfortunately. We can think that obviously there is a connection, but we cannot find it.
really heavily support the migration land bridge theory. There's also the Nostratic hypothesis that suggests that Indo-European and Afro-Asiatic may have a common ancestor. And on that note, there's the most controversial.
That would make sense geographically also. Like these Afro-Asiatic people and Proto-Indo-European, yeah, let's say it like that. And maybe some also other groups of people all these ancestors even of this Proto-Asiatic, okay, whatever, Afro-Asiatic, yes. So people lived still in a quite close proximity. If we look at Native Americans, how they spread and how these languages, yes, they do have some language groups, obviously, but all these language groups obviously are absolutely different from each other today. And if we look at Europe, Middle East, Northern Africa, is it really so crazy to assume that at some point, I don't know when, okay, let's say even it could be 20, 30,000 years ago, these people did still interacted, walked around, moved around, back and forth. No one stayed in one place. Is it really so crazy to think that there could be some kind of connection also in languages?
May have a common ancestor. And on that
If
note,
it's
there's
common
the most
ancestor, that's
controversial
a
one. I have
different
literally
question.
seen people like threateningly fight
It's
each other
never
over this. It's
one
crazy. Like,
ancestor.
first of all, most linguists do not ascribe to this theory, and they will think you're stupid if you bring it up. But there are still some people that ascribe to it. It is the
But-
Altaic or Trans-Eurasian
okay, yeah,
language theory that
I don't think,
proposes
of
a
course, it's
macro
stupid.
family that would link the Turkic, Mongolic,
We have to think that at some point, when all this part of our planet was covered in ice, people barely didn't live here, and most of the people, our ancestors, at some point, were concentrated, maybe somewhere around here. At some time, somewhere maybe around here, then people moved somewhere around here. Yeah, so at different times, it was different area. But at first, they didn't really spread straight away to all planet. It happened very slowly. And Ice Age was the real thing. Why would you move to ice-covered land? There's nothing to do there. And if these people lived here somewhere, for example, yeah, I don't remember precisely, maybe even closer, like here, maybe. And these were very small groups. Is it really crazy to think at one point, logically thinking, yes, we cannot prove it, but that at some point there were some group of people which were more lucky to leave more descendants and maybe grow bigger. Like now, very often, even today we have this just few bigger language families. What happened to others? They went extinct, and back then also, yes, as I already said, a lot of languages went extinct. So we could think that technically it was possible to have one language group from which other language groups split off. But also, of course, there could be different language groups already, which are still didn't came from nowhere. Any language at any point in history had something before it. Until it was not a language but just a combination of sounds, of course.
Linguistic, Japonic or Japanese, and Koreanic or Korean languages. And if it were
Yes,
true,
they still
it would
originated
restructure the
somewhere
way how
very close to
everybody
each other
perceives a lot of
before
those
they
languages,
moved
especially since
out.
Korean and Japanese are language isolates. They don't fall under any other larger family group. They are their own language families. But yeah, and sometimes languages have like red herrings. Like you can't even really be sure if a word in the language was borrowed from another language family because this world has been so intermingled and mixed that oftentimes people borrow words and
Of
borrow things from
course.
other people. It's crazy. Like Arabic has influenced Spanish and Swahili. Spanish has influenced Tagalog and Filipino. Chinese has influenced Vietnamese. Persian has influenced the Turkic languages. Maltese is basically just Italianated Arabic. Even English, the English, modern English language that I'm speaking right now, is about 70% French and Latin derived. If you heard Old English, you would not understand
Yes,
any of it.
exactly.
That's just a testament to how fast and
Yes.
crazy languages evolve and change over time.
So,
and finally, there is
That's why you cannot find some kind of common ancestors. If you look at English and German already, or ancient English, like ancestors of English language, those are different language. Technically, those are completely already very different languages.
even greater and wilder theory of monogenesis, or a controversial idea that
But why
says
is-
all known languages, with the exceptions of like creoles, pigeons,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
sign
yeah.
languages, are all
Yeah.
descended from a single ancestral
this is
language.
not
I mean, the
so
idea of
crazy
a
if you
proto-world
think about
language,
it.
I mean, it sounds fascinating, but most linguists don't take that idea seriously because it's
Why?
like, first of all, it can't really ever be proven.
Yes, the fact that it can't be proven doesn't mean it didn't exist. Okay, actually, yes, of course, technically, not necessarily this happened in one group. It could happen simultaneously in different groups of people. It could, of course, yes, that, but we cannot prove any of these possibilities. But also, knowing how we are close to each other genetically, that means that we still interacted. All these different groups of people still did some kind of communications, most likely between each other.
Usually takes about like 8 to 10,000 years for all evidence of any kind of relationship between family groups to
Yeah.
disappear. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
like
yeah,
we will never know.
Yeah, we will
probably
never
will
know.
never know unless we can actually build time machines. But going back to the original question at the very beginning of this video, one interesting thing: research from linguists of the Max Planck Institute for Psycholinguistics has found that there seems to be one word that is evident and appears in almost every single language in the world. What
Interesting.
is that word? That word is the ever so inquisitive huh? In almost every language on earth, you can find people saying the word huh?
Is it
Or
a
some
word?
variation of it, like huh?
Can we
That
call it a
upward
word?
questioning inflection, huh? That's almost
Uh-huh.
in every single language on earth. And maybe that's the one thing that connects all of us
But,
humans and
yes,
our languages, that inquisitive.
You think about first language. It was not already complex, long words. If we look very back for thousands of years, when it was already could be considered as a form of language. Most likely those were shorter words, shorter, simpler words, following like this kind of pattern. And before that, that was some kind of sound imitations of something, actions, animals. Animals make sense because of hunting and everything, and not just that. And even before that, when people started to use their voice, of course, those were not words in our understanding, but those were most likely this kind of like sounds, intonations, like exclamation, something like this. Yes, it makes sense. This really can be, and not maybe just this word, if we can call it a word even. Interestingly, as our budgies also have this word, like this questioning word, which is like this questioning chirp when something was happening unusual around them. I cannot replicate it, but so it's maybe not even necessary just human thing to question things. Okay, but yeah, interesting, of course.